It was July 20th, 1944. Inside Hitler's secret command complex, dozens of top Nazi officials gathered for a routine meeting. One of them steps out for a phone call, and moments later, a deafening explosion rocks the room. This daring act would become the most famous attempt on Hitler's life, known to history as Operation Valkyrie. Today, we're going to find out: how close did ordinary people get to killing Hitler? Why did so many attempts fail, even when the plan seemed perfect? Who risked everything to stop the Nazi leader, and why? How did Hitler survive against so many conspiracies against him? By the late 1930s, Hitler was already a force reshaping Germany. The Nazi Party had risen to power, and Hitler was consolidating control over the army, police, and secret services. But even in the midst of this power, a few brave officers and determined individuals started plotting against him. One such man was Georg Elser, a quiet, skilled worker who came up with a plan that almost changed history. Elser's first major attempt took place during the annual November celebration of the 1923 Beer Hall Putsch. Using his experience as a craftsman, he constructed a time bomb, hid it inside a structural column, and timed it to go off in the middle of Hitler's speech. For weeks, he observed the hall, studied Hitler's movements, and prepared every detail with painstaking care. On November 8, 1939, everything was in place. The timer was set, the bomb ready. But in a twist of fate, Hitler began his speech an hour early. By the time the explosion tore through the hall, he had already left the stage. Elser's attempt, meticulous as it was, failed because of luck, or perhaps Hitler's sixth sense. Meanwhile, the resistance inside the German military was slowly forming. Some officers believed Hitler's aggressive expansion and reckless strategies would lead Germany to disaster. Early conspiracies tried to leverage international support from Britain and France, but foreign powers were reluctant to provoke a large-scale war. So for a while, internal conspirators had to act alone, often relying on courage, creativity, and sheer determination to try and stop Hitler. By the early 1940s, Hitler's military successes across Europe only strengthened his position. Yet some army officers, alarmed by the planned invasion of the Soviet Union and other strategic errors, realized the stakes were higher than ever. They began planning more audacious attempts: bombs disguised as gifts, suicide missions, and high-risk operations designed to strike at Hitler directly, while minimizing the loss of other key military leaders. What exactly happened at Hitler's Wolf's Lair that day remains a bit of a mystery. One version says the meeting started earlier than planned, and Stauffenberg simply didn't have time to prepare both bombs. Another says a co-conspirator sabotaged the attempt after realizing some top Nazi officials wouldn't be present. Either way, the plotters had a problem. The commander of the reserve army, General Fromm, was furious when he learned his troops had been mobilized without his knowledge. But the team had no time to waste. If they were going to kill Hitler, the next chance had to succeed. On July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg flew into the Wolf's Lair with his assistant, Werner von Haften, carrying 2 bombs in a briefcase that looked suspiciously heavy. The meeting was moved from a reinforced bunker to a single-story conference hall with open windows because of the summer heat. Using a clever excuse, Stauffenberg said he needed to change his shirt and brought Haften along, giving them time to arm the explosives. Only 1 bomb was ready. Stauffenberg placed the briefcase about 3 people away from Hitler. Then, under the pretense of a phone call from Berlin, he left the room. Another officer, Brandt, nudged the briefcase slightly closer to a sturdy table leg. At 12:42 p.m., the bomb exploded. Witnesses described the blast as so powerful that some thought a Soviet plane had dropped it. One officer was even thrown out a window. Outside, Stauffenberg saw the chaos and assumed Hitler was dead. It seemed almost impossible for the Führer to survive, given the proximity of the bomb. Yet Hitler did survive. burned, bruised, torn clothing, but alive. Open windows in the hall and the moved briefcase had saved him. Back in Berlin, the conspirators immediately began Operation Valkyrie, thinking Hitler was dead. Troops were mobilized, key government buildings were seized, and arrests were made. In France, anti-Hitler generals managed to capture hundreds of SS officers without firing a shot. But confusion and miscommunication were disastrous. The Wolf's Lair re-established contact around 4 p.m., and the reserve army commander realized Hitler was alive. Loyal forces in Berlin quickly turned the tide. Gunfire erupted, Stauffenberg was wounded, and key plotters were arrested. By 11:30 p.m., Stauffenberg and other leaders of the coup were executed. The next day, Hitler gave a public speech. Other conspirators, like Henning von Treschow and even the legendary General Rommel, either committed suicide or were later arrested. More than 50 people were implicated in Operation Valkyrie. Many were executed immediately. Others languished in prison until the Nazi regime fell in May 1945. Objectively, Operation Valkyrie wouldn't have changed the war. By July 1944, Germany was already losing. Soviets were pushing in the east, and the Allies had landed in Normandy. Killing Hitler wouldn't have guaranteed peace. But for the conspirators, it was about humanity, honor, and duty. They acted knowing that even if they failed, their courage would leave a mark. Live in the moment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.